So welcome everybody for this very first track two dialogue between ORF and Geopolitical Cartographer. Uh, I think we are both leading think tanks in our two countries, and we hope that this is the beginning of, as they said in that last dialogue of Casablanca, a beautiful friendship, and we look forward to it. Uh, ORF is, of course, the leading think tank in India. It's a completely privately funded think tank, uh, and of course, Geopolitical Cartographer is one of the leading think tanks in Sri Lanka. So I think this will be a very fruitful partnership. Today's program, which is the first, which I hope in a long series of dialogues which we'll hold with each other. Uh, what we propose is that we will have two sessions. The first one will be on the state of relationship between India and Sri Lanka, and if we can throw some new ideas on how to take this relationship forward. The second session will be on maritime security, and but before that, I'd just like to formally welcome everybody for this track two. And before we start the first session, which I'll be moderating, can I request Mr. Rishan de Silva to say a few words, uh, and then we'll kickstart the rest of the program. Rishan, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, distinguished guests, panelists, and participants. Welcome to this online webinar hosted as a collaboration between the Geopolitical Cartographer and the Observer Research Foundation. Today, we are privileged to convene a panel of experts to explore two critical themes: the bilateral relations between India and Sri Lanka, and the imperative of maritime security in the Bay of Bengal region. India and Sri Lanka share a relationship which is deeply rooted in history, cultural affinities, and strategic interests. From ancient times to the modern era, our peoples have maintained close ties, marked by mutual respect and cooperation. It is indeed a pleasure to be a part of this discussion between our respective research foundations. Having initially spoken about this discussion with Dr. Anasua, who is part of one of the panels today, about a year ago. The Geopolitical Cartographer is a research foundation which was established by the Honorable Ranasinghe, who currently serves as Sri Lanka's president. We focus on the geopolitics, geoeconomics, and maritime affairs of the Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, and the connected landmass, which are redrawing the global order. Earlier this year, I was privileged to be invited by the Ministry of External Affairs of India to attend the Raisina Dialogue, which is run in collaboration with the Observer Research Foundation. This builds on the previous Raisina dialogues that others from our research foundation have attended, including those who attended while accredited as Sri Lanka's High Commissioners to India. I must also convey the regrets that our advisory member, Mrs. Shanaka Seneviratne, who currently serves as Sri Lanka's High Commissioner to India, cannot attend this discussion today, as she is out of Delhi on a conference on dairy. The Raisina Dialogue is a well-known dialogue in the international security space, and it is fitting that our two foundations can come together today as we collaborate with the Sri Lanka Navy on the Gowdara, which is also a well-known security dialogue. I'm sure that there's much to be learned and shared between our two foundations, and I look forward to the deliberations on today's panels. Today's first panel discussion provides an invaluable opportunity to explore the dynamics that shape our bilateral relations, identifying pathways for enhanced collaboration and mutual benefit. Equally crucial is our focus on maritime security in the Bay of Bengal. This vital maritime domain serves as a gateway for trade, connectivity, and regional stability. Addressing issues such as piracy, illegal fishing, and environmental challenges require concerted efforts and innovative strategies. The role of information fusion centers in enhancing maritime domain awareness and facilitating cooperative frameworks will be a central topic of exploration, and I look forward to the second panel discussion in this regard. Through the insights and expertise of our esteemed panelists, we aim to generate actionable recommendations that will not only strengthen India-Sri Lanka relations, but also contribute to regional advancement and security. The outcomes of today's discussion will play a pivotal role in shaping policies and initiatives ahead and ensuring a secure and prosperous maritime environment in the Indian Ocean region. I extend my gratitude to our distinguished panelists and moderators for agreeing to be a part of these discussions, and to all others for joining us today. Your active engagement in this dialogue underscores our shared commitment to fostering cooperation and advancing mutual interests. I also want to thank both Aditya Shivamurthy of the ORF and Devani Rambukwala from GC for their hard work in making today's event possible. Without further delay, let us embark on this journey of exploration and collaboration, seeking to deepen our understanding and chart a course towards a more secure and prosperous future for the region. Thank you. And over to you.
Thank you, Rishan. Now, we'll start the first session. Basically, the ground rules are very simple. We have 45 minutes. Each of the four panelists will get 5 minutes. Please try and stick to the time. After that, we'll just have an open discussion. Please feel free to weigh in on whatever you think needs to be flagged, whatever we need to discuss in greater detail as we go forward. But let me just start by saying that I think both the sessions today on bilateral relations as well as on maritime security are interlinked to each other. We cannot have maritime security for India or for Sri Lanka unless we have good bilateral relations, and vice versa. But I think it's even more important that we don't take a bilateral relationship for granted, which we very often tend to do because, as Rishan was saying, that you have millennia old relationships which you tend to take for granted, and I think it's very important not to do that. The world is in a churn, and we need to develop the necessary trust and confidence in each other, so that we can buck the trends which are sweeping the world in a way that's beneficial to us. So let me just start the first session. Let me just introduce formally all the four panelists. We have, of course, Rishan De Silva, Executive Director of GC. We have Ambassador Chitranganee Wagiswara, who's a serving ambassador, serving High Commissioner of Sri Lanka to Australia. We have Dr. Anasua Basu, our colleague from ORF Kolkata, and of course the redoubtable Aditya Gowdara Shivamurthy, who's an associate fellow at the ORF, and he's emerging to be one of the leading experts on Sri Lanka in India. So it's a great panel, and can I request Ambassador Wagiswara to start the deliberations? Ma'am, please go forward.
Okay, thank you very much. And first of all, let me thank the Executive Director, GC, and also you from ORF for inviting me. And let me say that I'm happy and pleased to participate in this interaction, and also because it's the subject, India-Sri Lanka relations, is of much interest to me. And as I also served in India, I keep my interest going. So I thank you for the opportunity. Speaking about India-Sri Lanka relations, our links are deep-rooted, as we know, history, culture, religion, dating back millennia, several millennia, as you said. The geographic proximity is also shaped, and the shared heritage and our linkages have spread across multitude of sectors. Today, as we have only 5 minutes, so I think I have to go very quickly. Based on the multidimensional relationship, our two countries maintain a very good, close and cordial relationship. As Dr. Jaishankar stated recently, our relationship is time-tested, based on a time-tested friendship, which we have maintained right up to the highest level. of course, on recent developments, of course, with the election of Prime Minister Modi for the third time, and then our president visiting India for the inaugural session, and also the External Affairs Minister of India visiting Sri Lanka just 1 week ago. All these meetings and interactions showed the desire on both sides to maintain the momentum of India-Sri Lanka relations. It is important to note India's neighborhood first policy, which was demonstrated at a time when Sri Lanka faced an unprecedented economic crisis in 2022. India granted nearly $4 billion US, which kept Sri Lanka afloat, and that gesture is much appreciated. Now we are going through the recovery process and our reform process together with the IMF and also other friendly countries, assistance of the friendly countries, and the stress, the focus is on economic building of economy and of course economic growth. That is the first priority, and thereby sustain the stability of the country. So what is taking forward the vision document which was entered into by both sides in July last year. It is important to highlight. I wish to pick up on a few areas to highlight where we are, India and Sri Lanka are working together. One is, of course, on energy security, which has brought about so many projects. The Sampur Solar Power Project, the oil tank development in Trincomalee, then the power grid interconnection, LIOC expansion, all those and many more. Then on the FTA, which came into operation in the year 2000 and which has worked relatively well, but still we realize, both sides have realized that we have to go beyond that and of course expand the scope. And of course, a few rounds of negotiations have been held, and both sides hope to enter into ECTA, Economic and Technological Cooperation Agreement, and we hope that it could be finalized or at least agreed upon, at least on some areas, very quickly. Then, of course, infrastructure projects ranging a multitude of areas from education, defense, agriculture, housing, all that is in place. And there are so many projects between the two sides. Being neighbors, the issue of connectivity is also very, very important. And I think that is one of the most important areas which, in a way, facilitates commercial and communication. And at the same time, it also contributes and facilitates people-to-people contacts. In this context, the use of soft power as a tool need to be emphasized by both sides. We can speak of what is already in place, the cultural diplomacy, religious, the Buddhist circuit, the Ramayana trail. Then what we would suggest is maybe we have to look a little more maybe on the youth and student exchanges, even high schools, like it happens in Europe, schools take the students to another country and expose them to a new culture, new way of living, and also expand their knowledge. So such programs, as I said, needs to be focused and build on this soft power, which would contribute in spreading and gaining knowledge, and importantly, a better understanding and appreciation, and also build a friendship between the two sides. So that would not only the young people, but also the media, the non-state actors, NGOs, think tanks are very important. And in this context, tourism is another area which is important. In Sri Lanka, tourism is really bouncing back. It's a very a sector that we focus a lot. And India, the highest number of tourists to Sri Lanka is from India, which is we are happy to note that. And the tourism area brings in revenue, and as well as what I keep on saying is a tourist today could be an entrepreneur tomorrow. So that is, we have to look at it from that aspect as well. From Sri Lanka's perspective, when you look at India, our closest neighbor, we see India, it's an emerging economic power, one of the fastest growing economies, and he's predicted that India will be the third, will be in the third place within the next few decades in terms of economic power. So Sri Lanka needs to look at all these aspects and look at further integration in economic and trade terms, especially the president, or our president also has been speaking about the more integration with the southern states, which should, and I think we have to, while the government will be a facilitator, the private sector, I think both countries have to encourage the private sector. Already there are people who have, like for instance, Brandix, that is in Visakhapatnam. There is a Brandix village in Visakhapatnam, which is very, very important and very successful. While we speak of close engagement and interaction between the two countries, we know that there could also be issues. When we work together, obviously there could be some issues, there are concerns, and perhaps even sometimes we might even have to make compromises. Going back to the neighborhood first policy of India, being good neighbors is also, I think, is a two-way street. Sri Lanka also tries to be a good neighbor towards our neighbors. And in terms of issues and concerns, I think both sides have to look at it in that from that point of view. On the subject of concerns that needs to be sorted out, we have the fisheries issue, of course, with South Indian fishermen crossing the IMBL, and also poaching and bottom trawling and all those issues, and which is an emotive issue for both sides. So the joint working group is already there, and the central government has attempted, in India, has attempted to find solutions. Of course, I must say, without much success. So strong decisions are important at the political level, which should contribute to at least try to manage that problem. Then concerns have been expressed by the South Indian politicians, especially in Tamil Nadu, and also the central government on the ethnic issue, the fallout of course, the war is all, the conflict is all behind us. But there are certain issues that needs to be maybe taken forward, reconciliation, devolution, and I must say that Sri Lanka is working on those issues, on the missing persons, reparations, truth and reconciliation. All those issues are being looked at. It's very complex and it needs time. Steps have also. Of course, on the 13th Amendment also there are questions raised, and that is also another complex issue which has to be, I mean, some of the issues that needs to be implemented has to look at from a point of view of the political dynamics in the country. Then, of course, we also have the refugee issue, where a large number of refugees are still living in camps, especially in Tamil Nadu, which I'll finish very soon, yes. And that's another area that needs to be looked at. If we turn to the region, concerns have been, I think I have to at least in passing make a reference to China's role in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka has always stated that Sri Lanka maintains good relations with all our neighbors, and Sri Lanka have, at the highest level, have reiterated that Sri Lanka will not allow any threats to India's national security. Our relations are with China are commercial. And of course, there are other issues like the port and also the spy ships issues, which are being maybe have been explained. In broader terms, in the region, the maritime footprint is also very important, but I will not go into it because I think the second panel will look at it. But there are repercussions, ramifications on India-Sri Lanka relations, on the Indian Ocean issues. So I will stop here for now. I hope I haven't gone beyond, and I'm open to further discussions or questions that anyone may raise. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you have gone beyond, and I let you go beyond because you were making excellent points, and you virtually flagged all the important issues. Um, in fact, the first the four main issues which you flagged right at the beginning of your presentation, I think those are the really positive issues on things which we can really work forward. But even on the political issues, I suppose there is increasing realization that these are not issues where one side is trying to score points over another side. Some of these, for example, the ethnic issue, it's as much in Sri Lanka's interest to resolve as it is, for example, for politicians in Tamil Nadu. So I think it needs to be done in a spirit of cooperative in a cooperative spirit, both in Sri Lanka and between Sri Lanka and India, and also on the other issues that you flagged, including the fisheries issue. Incidentally, I think Sri Lanka behaved very maturely and did not react in a knee-jerk manner as many other India's neighbors would. When Indian elections take place, they're pretty raucous and all kinds of things are said. And suddenly the issue of what is that? Kachativu was raised. And I think the Sri Lankans just took it in their stride and didn't react too much, which was excellent because it had nothing to do with Sri Lanka. The entire issue which was raised within India was basically a political football within the country. One side trying to score points over the other. It was not as though somebody was trying to take on Sri Lanka on that, and so I think that showed a lot of maturity on the Sri Lankan part, which is a great thing. But let me turn to Anasuya. Anasuya, please, 5 minutes. Mute. We still can't hear you. Maybe you should take out your earphones. That might work.
Hello.
Yeah, now it's good.
Is it okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Thank you, Sushant. And also, good morning, everyone, excellencies, and other delegates. It's my pleasure taking part in this inaugural track 2, discussion, which we conceptualized 1 year back in our conversation with Rishan. So I'm very happy that it is taking place, and I congratulate really to the organizers for taking this initiative to hold this dialogue. Okay. When I'm listening to Ambassador, when she has spoken about India's neighborhood first policy, I think it will be apt to start with India's neighborhood first policy and why Sri Lanka is so important in India's neighborhood first policy. As we all know that neighborhood first policy aims to improve its relationship with immediate neighbors, and since 2014, India's foreign policy through the neighborhood first policy has increasingly been geared towards strengthening ties with its immediate neighbors in different capacities, following the principle of non-reciprocity. Indeed, in India's neighborhood first policy, Sri Lanka holds a very, very important position. As Rishan also has talked about in his initial comments, that India and Sri Lanka's relationship is not new, but has remained in place through ages, not just economically, but both sides have built upon a legacy of intellectual, cultural, religious, and linguistic interactions. And also, Sushant has touched upon the critical issues that we have faced in our relationship, but how and to what extent, are these two countries have behaved more, in a matured way to overcome this difficult phase. In fact, in back in the year 2020, where we have found that our Prime Minister also reaffirmed that Sri Lanka will always be a priority under its neighborhood first policy. Now, the question is why Sri Lanka plays an important role in India's neighborhood first policy. I think I can put forth two main reasons. First, of course, as we have we have been reiterating its cultural and civilizational ties with India. So therefore, Sri Lanka is a priority, not as a priority. It's not a new addition to India's foreign policy, but foreign policy and the bilateral relations between the two range from the highest political level of interaction to growing trade and investment to cooperation in the fields of development to education, culture, and defense, as well as a broad understanding of major issues of geopolitical interests. But the second point, which I'm going to make, is really, really very interesting. That is the geostrategic location of Sri Lanka in South Asian region. Even before India became independent, the British also understood the strategic importance of the region, particularly from the perspective of the Indian Ocean, and they also built a strong naval base in the eastern part of the island country, that is at Trincomalee. And if we look at the geostrategic location of the country, we will see that this island republic is situated between the main shipping lanes connecting Europe with East Asia and the oil tanker routes connecting the Gulf oil producing nations with China, Japan, and other Pacific nations. And also, I would say that it is important to keep it in our mind that it is also crucial for the Indian Navy, because while switching naval fleets from the Bay of Bengal to Arabian Sea or vice versa, the ships pass via Sri Lanka. So India, for its seamless commercial connectivity as well as its own security in terms of the Indian Ocean strategy and partner networking for strengthening the Bay of Bengal solidarity, as well as under, of course, the rubric of BIMSTEC and also the Indian Ocean Rim community, I think India needs to have a very stable, good relationship with Sri Lanka and cannot actually afford to have hostile or turbulent Sri Lanka in its near vicinity, because as Ambassador also has pointed out that any political turmoil in the domestic front of Sri Lanka may have kind of repercussions in India as well. As the time is short, so I'm not going to say anything on the various projects, but just to reiterate the same thing, that the main focus of India-Sri Lanka friendship is on connectivity projects. And within these connectivity projects, as Ambassador also has highlighted, that the main focus is on energy cooperation. And in this particular field of energy, I think what is very important to look at is India's human-centric approach. In basically, if you look at energy cooperation initiatives,
we're running out of time.
Yes, just one point. Initiative that in Jaffna, the three countries which are the three places which are not directly linked up with national grid of energy supply within the country, India is helping to come up with a hybrid mode of energy supply, which is combination of solar and wind. But last, Sushant, if you allow me just 1 second, I would like to highlight why India-Sri Lanka cooperation can also enhance, the overall holistic cooperation or benefit within the Bay of Bengal region. I think what is very important to understand that Bay is very susceptible for natural disasters and also tropical cyclones. So if both the countries can cooperate with each other, can jointly work on this particular field, as long as these countries, they do have their fusion centers recently opened in Sri Lanka. So if they can have a kind of sharing of data and information and technological, combination, so it may help definitely the other Bay littorals in a near future. And also the last one is also very important, that in terms of other non-traditional security, which is a mandate of the BIMSTEC at this moment. Within this segment, I think very crucial is piracy, human trafficking, undocumented human migration, as well as migration or trafficking of drugs and drug smuggling. These are very crucial and increasingly becoming very, very crucial and tense issues. So if both the countries can work together, then I think they can have a spillover impact to strengthen the overall solidarity within the Bay of Bengal region. I'll stop here, Sushant. Thank you.
I think all the points you make are very valid, and most of them are actually eminently doable. But since I'm not in government, somebody like the ambassador is in government. This is on their head, how they manage to fix this. But I think all the points you raise are very relevant, especially the connectivity issues and the non-traditional security issues, which increasingly are becoming very, very critical. But let me turn to Rishan. Rishan, please weigh in on how we take the relationship forward. What are the things we can do? What are the things we shouldn't do? So the floor is yours. We can't hear you, Rishan. You're on mute, I think. Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Thank you, moderator. As Sushant, Sareen, as Mrs. Wagiswara has outlined, Sri Lanka has a long-standing and time-tested bilateral relations with India, which date millennia since before the time of the Ramayana, as well as the spread of Buddhism. Even some of my ancestors were guardians of the sacred boat tree, which came from the Indian subcontinent. In recent times, we are all well aware of how much India helped Sri Lanka during the economic crisis, especially in terms of energy, which was our immediate need given the long power cuts and fuel queues, which led to widespread unrest in the country. As others mentioned, Sri Lanka has been a direct beneficiary of India's neighborhood first policy, and I was honored to be a part of President Wickramasinghe's delegation at the start of the month when he was invited to attend the inauguration of Prime Minister Modi, where this policy of neighborhood first was visibly on display. Just this past weekend, our founder and patron has been speaking about how much India helped Sri Lanka get out of the economic difficulty. And just this, over the last few days, he spoke with India's finance minister to reiterate the same and to thank her for their help. Sri Lanka sees the 21st century, which some call the Asian century, as well underway, and is looking to increase its connectivity with India and the Indian Ocean region. Of course, this has been dealt some setbacks with the ongoing conflicts and pandemic, as well as some isolationist policies. So there is no reason why these should hinder our progress going forward. As many Sri Lankans witnessed during the economic crisis, the government should play less of an active role in business and should allow for incentives and structures that enable our respective private sectors to work together and grow. And I think a good example of this is the India relationship with Sri Lanka. Earlier this year, we signed a free trade agreement with Thailand, building on our existing FTA with Singapore, and are now looking to other regional FTAs, including the RCEP and deepening of the FTA with India, as Mrs. Wagiswara mentioned, in forms of the Economic and Technology Cooperation Agreement, the ETCA. We believe that by linking with the 5 southern states of India, Sri Lanka is assured to grow with India. On a bilateral level, Mrs. Wagiswara has outlined some of the shared areas in economic, cultural, and political spheres. And to this, I would also like to add connectivity, not merely in physical infrastructure, like pipelines, ports, and ferry services or land connectivity, but also digital. Physical connectivity is important, the resumption of ferry services, as well as the development of the ports of Colombo, the Palali and Mattala airports, as well as the discussions on the Trincomalee Harbour are welcome. As Dr. Anasua referred, we all know that when the Southeast Asia Command of the Allied Forces was established during World War II, it was inaugurated in Delhi and headquartered in Kandy, and the Eastern Fleet was based in Trincomalee. So Trincomalee does provide not just a strategic location for Sri Lanka, but also for access to the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean region. Digital services and agricultural modernization are also important low-hanging fruits, which can enable our people to attain increased access and mobility. And further deliberations in these spheres would be welcome. We are well aware of the deepening of the ETCA, which will inevitably result in the increase in trade and services. So agriculture, technology, and fisheries modernization, as well as digital connectivity such as BPO and IT services are important areas to pursue. On the energy sector, we have seen India's involvement traditionally in the Sampo, the oil tank farms, LIOC, and more recently we have seen connectivity being pursued in terms of the pipelines and large-scale private sector proposals for renewable energy as well, which is the future for our countries that do not produce crude oil. Linking our energy grid provides opportunities to become a net exporter for Sri Lanka. In housing, we have seen Indian government programs and military collaboration, which goes beyond staff college exchanges. We also share a long history of educational and cultural exchanges. That said, while many projects have been announced, progress is slow and the people are waiting to see delivery. An example being the oil tank farms in Trincomalee, which Sri Lanka first gave a part ownership to India over 2 decades ago. These tanks were used to decentralize fuel supply during World War II and indicating their strategic importance for the region. Taking over such strategic assets should also result in their expedited development for the benefit of the people and the region. Over the last few years, we have witnessed the announcement of a few large-scale projects, with Trincomalee Harbour also being recently announced. Yet, being involved in these strategic assets means that there should be some visible deliveries. So, because I'm at the end of my time, I'll say we are India's closest maritime neighbor, and our bilateral relationship may be the strongest partnership that India enjoys in the region. Sri Lanka envisions itself as a hub of the Indian Ocean region, and therefore we believe strongly in linking ourselves to India's growth. The geopolitical cartography of Sri Lanka's outlook has definitely been positively affected by India's assistance to Sri Lanka in recent times, and Sri Lanka hopes to build on this strong relationship so that our two countries can grow together. Once again, I welcome this discussion between our two research foundations, and I look forward to the day we can meet in person. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rishan. I think you make some very good points, especially on the one on digital connectivity. And I think that's something which we really need to focus on. Again, it's a low-hanging fruit. It's not something which is really complicated for the two countries to do. And the private sector can jump into this without any major governmental interference. And I think the second very good point which you make is on delivery. And the delays on, we agree on many things, but then when it comes to actually delivering on the ground, there are bureaucratic processes and all kinds of other obstacles that come in the way, and we really need to figure a way out on getting around that. But thanks a lot for your presentation. Aditya, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me start by saying that over the last decade, what we have seen is a significant positive momentum between India and Sri Lanka relations, and I agree with my previous panelists. And I think arguably this is one of the best phase and the momentum of India-Sri Lanka relations since the beginning of this century. And I say this because also for the lot of reasons that there is a domestic politics that favors this system, and there is also this international politics that favors the ongoing bilateral relationship between India and Sri Lanka. Um, Sri Lanka, as a lot of you have pointed out previously, has held a lot of significance under the neighborhood first policy. And obviously, with Sri Lanka's evolving geography, India has also grown to be more accommodative to Sri Lanka's interests and Sri Lanka's concerns, and has been trying to integrate Sri Lanka and promote more economic connectivity. Now, over the last 10 years, also, credit to our government getting a supermajority in the parliament, that the government was actually flexible to do what it wanted to do and cater to Sri Lanka's needs better than what it was in early 2004 to 2014. Um, and that and then significantly adding up to the fact that Sri Lanka in itself has evolved significantly in the last 15 20 years in terms of its geography, and as its prominence in international politics grows, in geopolitics grows, there has been outreach from India to increase this bilateral relationship. And in fact, the fact that Modi was the first prime minister to visit Jaffna in Sri Lanka, and the Modi was the first prime minister to visit Sri Lanka in 28 years' time, demonstrates this fact that that the relationship is heading into a positive direction. Now, we have seen around $5 billion US assistance in terms of development cooperation going from India to Sri Lanka, and there has been a significant attempt from India to remove this perception that India's development assistance is just oriented to the Tamil-centric region off to the north or the east of the region, rather to show that India's development assistance is now being, offered throughout the country. And I think the ambulance service that India offered, which taps upon this people-to-people relations and which has grown very popular in Sri Lanka, is something that demonstrates the fact that India is not just focused on the minority, but rather focuses on broader India-Sri Lanka relations and people-to-people relations. The economic crisis further saw India offering $4.5 billion assistance, and then it also saw India expanding into projects such as taking after the the West Container Terminal of the Colombo port, and then also running, managing an airport in Hambantota, which shows that India has tried to move away from this perception that India is just offering assistance to the north and the Tamil-dominated regions. Apart from that, we have seen a lot of these connectivity efforts coming into place. First of all, in terms of people-to-people relations, direct flights increasing, energy projects, which Rishan and Dr. Anasua Basu pointed out. Then India is also planning to, India and Sri Lanka are also discussing to plan a bridge which increases the connectivity and direct trade between both the countries. And also at a time it comes in handy when Indian Ocean is seeing increasing militarization and presence of extra regional powers. I think this also offers a significant connectivity aspect for both the countries. There are discussions to build an oil refinery in Jaffna. There are discussions to build power grids and oil pipelines which are bidirectional, so which can help both India and Sri Lanka. And also, Indian firms coming in to maintain and manage Sri Lankan ports, or at least help develop Sri Lankan ports and airports, which taps upon the fact that Sri Lanka also wants to develop and be an economic hub in the Indian Ocean region. There are discussions for the economic and technical cooperation agreement in terms of service-to-service cooperation. And we have also seen significant development in terms of security-wise connectivity. For example, the Colombo Security Conclave has picked up a lot of pace since 2019. Regular maritime exercises which have been happening for a while, and in fact, Foreign Minister Jaishankar was there previously. They also inaugurated the MRCC. India has donated a Dornier aircraft. India is also discussing to open up a small arms unit in Sri Lanka, which is again to promote the security cooperation and defense cooperation between both these countries. Over a point in time, what we have seen in the last 10 years is we have seen this connectivity increase manifold, and hopefully it will continue to increase with the government continuing to be in place in India. there is pragmatism that took place in the last 10 years, and we continue to expect it as long as this government is there and there are no significant political lobbies or domestic lobbies that come to its obstruction. But that said, again, to what look forward is the Sri Lankan elections that are coming up, and I think there are hopes in India that at least the Indian projects would not be politicized in the coming future. And I think from the Sri Lankan side, there are more hopes, as Rishan pointed out, that the delivery and the delivery of these projects and the implementation of these projects should happen more, efficiently. I leave it by saying that that there are hopes and positives, pragmatism from both the sides, and this is. In fact, probably the elections in Sri Lanka could offer a better future direction on how to go ahead.
Thanks. I think, again, you're right. Uh, People tend to focus sometimes on some of the negative aspects, but if you start weighing in, the positives far outscore anything which is negative in the relationship. And I think it's on the positives that we need to build upon. And I think you make another very good point uh, on the hope that you express that projects should not necessarily be politicized. Unfortunately, they very often are. Most of the criticism is ill-informed. Uh, but it's there, and I don't think there's sufficient pushback, even from people who realize that a lot of that criticism is misplaced. And I think it's important to clarify that, because otherwise sometimes these things just get a life of their own and just carry on and festering. Now we have 5 minutes, but I'll take 10. uh, Anybody who wants to make any point, please feel free to weigh in and express your opinion. If you want to have ask any question of any of the panelists, please feel free to do it. But please be brief so that we can get as many comments and questions in the next 10 minutes. Yeah, we'll take multiple comments, questions, whatever. So please go ahead, Mr. Wignaraja.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions for the panel. The first is really what can we do about the infrastructure connectivity? There is this multimodal plan coming up. We're talking about energy connectivity, we're talking about others. And how can that be made win-win? I mean, in Sri Lanka, there are concerns that India will shut off the energy, for instance, perhaps if there is a dispute. So how do we ensure safeguards? Second question is on the trade agreement. This negotiation is going on today, the FTA, and I have sort of had some inkling of it. And the Indian negotiators don't seem to want to open up to the sectors where Sri Lanka has an advantage. Textiles or tea, those are all blocked on the grounds that Indian small and medium enterprise will suffer losses if Sri Lanka exports, which sounds quite strange because India is now a powerhouse. So what thoughts do the panel have on these types of important issues, which are a win-win for economic gains? Thank you.
Panel, but I can tell you that way back in the early 2000s, there was a parliamentary report I'd come across which spoke about Indo-Sri Lanka trade ties. And there was something on, some kind of free trade agreement at that point of time. And what was quite mind-boggling to me was that the point which Dr. Wignaraja you raised, that the two areas in which Sri Lanka was most competitive were the two areas that the bureaucrats in India wanted to block. And it didn't make sense because trade, if it has to work, it has to be beneficial for both sides. And the point is that how much tea will, and that time even rubber was there actually. And my question always used to be, how much tea is Sri Lanka going to sell us? There's a limit to it. They have other markets. So how much textile can they sell us? And in case the Sri Lankan textile industry is more competitive, maybe we can learn something from them. But uh, frankly, I shouldn't be saying it. But frankly, the bureaucratic mind is impervious to logic. With all due respect to the High Commissioner, bureaucratic minds are very impervious to logic. But anybody else who wants to weigh in, please go ahead. Answer Dr. Wignaraja's question. maybe the High Commissioner can do it. I've been raving and ranting against bureaucrats, but with all due respect.
Sushant, can I intervene? Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for raising this crucial question related to energy exchange. You know, the point that I have raised, it's on hybrid combination of solar and wind energy. And at this moment, there is a negotiation that the energy will be generated. The amount will be 2,230 kilowatt, and the investment from the Indian side would be nearly 11 million USD. But you have correctly pointed out these constraints because it was once. It has been one of the important concerns when there was a negotiation between India, Bangladesh, and Nepal in energy exchange. But they have solved this problem so far as our pricing is concerned. Through dialogues and a series of discussions. So I am hopeful that if there is any kind of crucial issue propped up, then probably through dialogue and proper discussion and understanding of the situation, I think that can be solved.
I think there are also very stringent safeguards that are built into these kind of contracts. It's not possible for for example, for India simply to shut off electricity because somebody has just gotten angry about something. That's not the way it will work. There are international obligations. Sri Lanka can drag India to the international arbitration tribunals, which most of these kind of contracts have that built into the contracts framework. So I don't think that is possible. But that's always a possibility, but it's not something that can be done, on a whim and a fancy. So the even for example on oil pipelines, on a range of other such connectivity issues, very very stringent safeguards are built in, which protect the interests of both parties. It cannot be done in a whimsical manner that one day somebody decides and says that okay, fine, I have a grudge and I'm going to turn off the tap. Doesn't work that way.
Okay. Can I say something on the
Please
second
go ahead.
question?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, raised by Ganesh. On the ETCA, yes, I know now FTA was signed in 2000, so now it's nearly 25 years. And also the talks on ETCA also, I think, started a couple of years ago. And these issues are there on both sides, opening up more for more quotas, then also the standards and other conditions. But I think what we should try to do is at least decide on a few sectors, one or two sectors, which are possible to go ahead without waiting till the entire range of issues are sorted out. Sort of do it in stages, because then the both sides can watch you open up one sector and then see whether there are issues or whether it can be implemented, and then gradually open up the other sectors. I know even on Sri Lanka side there were the issues on the services sector. Say for instance, Indian doctors coming to Sri Lanka. But at the same time, the professionals or the entrepreneurs might have one view, then the masses, the people will have a different view. So sometimes you have to by maybe give it open up, give it a chance, use it as a maybe trial period, and see how things could go along. Thank you.
We've already gone over 5 minutes, so we'll end this session here. And can I ask, request Dr. Ganeshan Wignaraja to now chair the second session? Sir, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Let's go straight into this important session on maritime security. And we have about 45 minutes, I think, again. We should finish by about 12:35 or 12:40 at the latest. May I ask Dr. Rohan to give his remarks? Rohan, could you give those in 5-6 minutes, if at all? So
sure.
Chat. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Wignaraja. It's certainly a pleasure for me to participate in this discussion on this important aspect of maritime security. I think it's important to understand the terms that we use. We talk of maritime security in a very broad sense. I think it is wide enough to capture both the security of the maritime user as well as the coastal state. Is that integrated concept of maritime security that we talk about. Now, one important aspect of ensuring maritime security is to enhance what we call maritime domain awareness, or MDA. Now, the way that one can accomplish that task of enhancing maritime domain awareness is to encourage conduct of marine scientific research. And here again, marine scientific research can take many forms, and we run into some ambiguity when we say marine scientific research. Question can be raised: is it what is called pure science or pure research, or can it also include gathering of military intelligence, perhaps, the guise of marine scientific research? So where do you draw the line? And it's important for us to get these clarifications in our minds. And secondly, the increasing aspect of maritime crimes is also important for us to bear in mind, and it's happening in different parts of the Indian Ocean, and we are all aware what's going on, particularly in certain parts of the Indian Ocean. So, and this is where organizations like the UNODC can play a meaningful role in combating maritime crimes. And here we are talking of people smuggling, narcotics and drug smuggling. So it's very, very important. Combat with that. And also, it is also interlinked with the growing role of the non-state actor. And we have been listening all this time to the excellent state of relations between India and Sri Lanka. But here we have this new, I won't say new, but the phenomenon of the non-state actor and the role that the non-state actor can play in this type of crime committed in the ocean. So maybe I can leave Admiral Jagath to enlarge on some of these areas, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thought it might be quite nice to maybe have one Sri Lankan speaker followed by an Indian speaker. So we mix up the perspectives a little bit, if you all don't mind. May I, if that's okay, may I ask Pratnashree Basu to give some remarks, please? JJ, you will be number third if you don't mind. So we mix it up.
That's okay.
Thank you. I think that'll be more interesting for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wignaraja. It's almost afternoon, so good afternoon, everyone. My intervention will focus on three things. Of course, maritime security and the securitization in the Bay of Bengal, some of the recent developments between the two countries pertaining to maritime security. And I would also like to focus briefly on the opportunities for Japan's partnership with India and Sri Lanka in the Bay. Now, the Bay has gained a lot of prominence geopolitically for two factors. First, attempts by China, of course, to gain footholds among the Bay littorals, and second, efforts by the littorals of the Bay of Bengal, as well as countries of the wider Indo-Pacific, such as Japan and the US, to establish and sustain functional cooperation mechanisms that would serve to build greater interconnections for regional development. The first aspect is an important project for Beijing, the Southwestern Access Strategy, which is now almost over 2 decades old. It's important for its southwestern landlocked provinces, and it also gives China access to into the subcontinent for alternative sources of energy, as we've seen through the Chokpu pipeline in Myanmar. Now, Beijing's quest for maritime access is, of course, not benign, as we've known and seen across on several instances across the world, and therefore apprehensions regarding its ulterior motives have prompted countries to respond and build strategies that would act as a guardrail against China's advances. And in the region, in the geography that we are discussing today, Sri Lanka's position, very close to the east-west shipping route is, of course, very important. I think it was mentioned in the earlier panel. A few important recent developments that have taken place vis-a-vis maritime security. For years, India has assisted Sri Lanka in setting up the coastal radar surveillance systems. Security agencies and in the Indian Coast Guard have also conducted training programs for Sri Lankan port personnel. India has been involved in the rehabilitation of the Kankesanturai Harbour in northern Sri Lanka, and of course the Trincomalee oil tank farm. During External Affairs Minister Jaishankar's visit last week, as Aditya mentioned in the earlier panel, the Maritime Research Coordination Center, MRCC, was established and launched to be run by the Bharat Electronics Limited, and it will serve as the nerve center for rescue operations at sea, given that the bay is a very tumultuous water body. It's, of course, very important. The main center will be located in Colombo, with a sub-center in Hambantota. Now, in the Bay of Bengal region, as well as in the wider Indo-Pacific, as I mentioned in my first point as well, China's influence poses a systemic challenge due to its predatory diplomacy, its debt-inducing aid structures, and territorial advances. And in this context, I would like to bring in Japan, because Japan's engagement with the littorals across the bay has attempted to fill the gaps and address the concerns that typically accompany China's involvement. And therefore, Japan's engagement accounts for a more constructive format of cooperation based on reciprocal partnerships. Japan's strategic policy has prioritized the bay, particularly in recent years, and across the bay, the country has helped to build maritime capacities, strengthen law enforcement, support coastal infrastructure projects, and so on. In Sri Lanka, in particular, Japan has provided patrol boats and planes to the Coast Guard and financed improvements at the Trincomalee port in the country. Japan's strategic investments also underscore its commitment to strengthening its influence in fostering a stable and secure maritime trade routes in this maritime space. Now, while the China factor will continue to influence regional partnerships, the scope of cooperative mechanisms across the bay has diversified, and this has ensured sustainability of partnerships that are not just driven by the China factor, And in that context, Sri Lanka's aspiration to play a more proactive role in the Indian Ocean region has gained momentum, especially under current President Ranil Wickremesinghe's government. And as India too has demonstrated its intent and capacity to engage across diverse sectors of cooperation within the Bay littoral, with the Bay littorals, New Delhi and Colombo, I think, are poised to bolster their maritime partnership. India's engagement with Sri Lanka in terms of maritime security reflects the country's broader regional strategy of fostering cooperative security frameworks. And this strategic approach underscores India's commitment to being a net security provider in the region, while ensuring that the Bay and the Indian Ocean remain a zone of peace and stability. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the point about China is very interesting, as well as this trilateral cooperation with Japan. I'm sure we'll come back to that in the chat. Let me turn over to JJ now for his remarks.
Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you very much. And I'll be very brief of this subject, the Bay of Bengal and the maritime security in that. Basically, the Bay of Bengal, it's all aware that it's the northeastern part of the Indian Ocean. Geographically, it is positioned between the Indian subcontinent and the Indo-Chinese peninsula, located below the Bengal region. And that is probably the largest water region called a bay in the world. And most of the South Asian and East Asian countries are dependent on the Bay of Bengal. And if I talk about the Bay of Bengal maritime security, we should discuss the evolving geopolitics and challenges in the region also. Otherwise, you can't talk about the maritime security. In this region, particularly concerning the maritime trade flows and the safety and security of sea line of communication, the maritime security is not only the security per se, it connects everything together, like the economic security, you get the human security, identification, thefts, etc. All these things has to be, in a broader perspective manner, has to be looked on when you start discussing about the maritime security. And more, with all these things together, I reckon, as Professor Dr. Rohan said, the maritime security is basically the Bay of Bengal. If we're going to talk about, it should be, you cannot talk isolatedly without talking about the maritime domain awareness. So maritime domain awareness in the region, or the Bay of Bengal region, has to be a very cohesive and also collective MDA. It should not be particularly to country wise. It has to have a very cohesive approach on the MDA, or understanding the MDA, maritime domain awareness, in the region. It's like, if you being sailors, we all know about what is the anchor cable. So the strength of the anchor cable always remains with the weakest link or the weakest shackle. The weight that can be held by the weakest shackle holds the total strength of the cable. Similarly, the power of the MDA and power of the maritime security in the region remains with the coastal state or the country in the region, who can whose effectiveness in maritime security remains as the ultimate. So there can be very powerful countries like India being next to us, or other emerging countries, even the Indo-China peninsula, there will be very emerging countries. So all these are there, but then the weakest country that has the power and the effectiveness of the weakest country or weakest state within the region retains the ability and capability of protecting the maritime security in the Bay of Bengal. In this, because of the time constraint, I will go with small points, which are all layman's points, but still worthwhile to mention about. Surveillance and monitoring is a very important aspect. Basically, the advanced radar and satellite systems are essential for monitoring maritime activities, the real-time monitoring, and detecting threats such as illegal fishing, smuggling, and piracy. Also, the vessel tracking. Implementing real-time tracking of vessels ensures accountability, helps identify security risks, and supports the safe and efficient flow of maritime trade. Then the information sharing, there's no point that they track, they have the information as what's happening in real time, but if these information are not shared, then there will be a problem. So information sharing is very important in this context with other countries in the region. The other factor is the law enforcement coordination. There can be the offenders, and law information coordination is a must. It may be illegal fishing, or it may be illegal activities, or it may be some of the non-traditional threats into, but they all have to have a law enforcement coordination within the countries, and there is a proper mechanism is yet to be seen. The port security also very important. Port security, ensuring security of ports and maritime infrastructure through stringent access control, surveillance and screening procedures prevents unauthorized activities and enhance trade security. So to keep up the trade security, the port security is also very important. The environmental protection is quite a big to discuss. There are a lot to discuss in the environment protection. So I just mentioned that monitoring and addressing environmental threats such as oil space, protect marine ecosystems are very important in the region. Customs and border control, also similar to the port security, are very important in this context. And international, with all this, the international cooperation is a must. Engaging in regional and international partnerships that will promote the collective action against the maritime challenges in the region. And finally, it is the legislation and the policy development. Bay of Bengal region, there is an opportunity, and also there is always more to do in legislation and policy development. In my opinion and understanding, there are very limited legislation and policy developments have been formulated. So there are a lot of things to be done future, and keeping that, I will end my little discussion and the brief now.
Thank you very much, JJ. I think the small points you made are as important as the big points we're listening, because we have to build a house with 1,000 bricks, and I think your point is very valid. And also the very important point about regional cooperation in this Bay of Bengal vast space that is there, and we probably haven't done as much of maritime cooperation as we would like. May I now call on the last speaker, Sayanthan Haldar, to provide their remarks. Shanthan, the floor is yours.
Thank you to the chair. I hope I'm audible.
Yeah, can you turn on your camera for a minute so we can see you, or just wave?
Yeah, in the conference hall. So,
great. Please proceed.
Okay. Yeah. So, thank you to the chair. I think it would be helpful for us to first sort of unpack the concept of the Bay of Bengal and then see or make an assessment of whether or not India and Sri Lanka are on the same page with regards to the concept of Bay of Bengal. So, if we undertake a geospatial reading of the Bay of Bengal region, I think three broad views sort of emerge. One is the view that the Bay of Bengal is an important sub-region within the wider Indian Ocean expanse, which is to say that the strategic churns in the region should not be seen as divorced from the security dynamics that are unfolding in the wider Indian Ocean region. And from an Indian perspective, I think if we talk about the security dynamics in the Indian Ocean region, the primary concern that we have is that of China's expanding footprint in the Indian Ocean region. Now, to sort of pose the question whether or not India and Sri Lanka are on the same page with regards to China's expansion in the Indian Ocean region, I think there isn't a great degree of convergence on that regard. The second is a view that the Bay of Bengal is a bridge or a buffer zone between the Indian and the Pacific Oceans, and almost in a sense representing the hyphenation in the term Indo-Pacific. Now, India has a certain view of the Indo-Pacific, and Sri Lanka has a certain view of the Indo-Pacific, and Sri Lanka has been very cautious of not sort of embracing a view of the Indo-Pacific that poses the risk of sort of Chinese uh, contempt towards the region. So in that sense as well, India and Sri Lanka do not seem to be on the same page as far as the view of Bay of Bengal with regards to Indo-Pacific is concerned. Now, the third view I think is very important in this sense, which talks about the Bay of Bengal as a strategic system unto itself, where the security and strategic dynamics of the Bay of Bengal guide state behavior in harnessing the potential of economic and human security interests of the countries in the region. And I think a wonderful example of this is the emergence of the BIMSTEC and how countries in the Bay of Bengal region have sort of enhanced cooperation under the rubric of BIMSTEC. Now, given this sort of a context, I think it is important for us to focus that the Bay of Bengal is the primary maritime neighborhood or the shared maritime space between India and Sri Lanka. And therefore, it is important for India and Sri Lanka to view the Bay of Bengal by divorcing it from their broader sort of outlook towards the Indian Ocean region, because as I mentioned, there seems to be a great degree of divergence on that front. Now, a few manifestations of this, of course, I think are important. One is the instance when Sri Lanka granted permission to the Chinese research and survey vessels to be docked at the Hambantota port, though, of course, later there has been a temporary prohibition on any such docking on Sri Lankan ports, but still it sort of raised a sense of alarm within Indian strategic circles. And India tends to take Chinese expanding footprint in the Indian Ocean very seriously. So the imprint in Indian strategic circles of the bonhomie between China and Sri Lanka has sort of raised a sense of suspicion with regards to Sri Lanka's sort of role in enabling Chinese expanding footprint in the Indian Ocean region. But of course, this is not to say that India and Sri Lanka do not have any scope for cooperation on the maritime security front in the Bay of Bengal at all. Now, my contention is that as far as Bay of Bengal and India and Sri Lanka are concerned, I think non-traditional maritime security challenges is the specific domain where there is a lot of potential to enhance cooperation. Now, just for some context, I think there are three major naval maritime exercises undertaken between India and Sri Lanka. The first is the Sri Lanka-India naval exercise, which is a bilateral naval exercise between the two countries to enhance cooperation, coordination, and interoperability. The second is exercise Dosti, which is a Coast Guard level trilateral between India, Sri Lanka, and Maldives. And the third is exercise Milan, which involves a host of Indian Ocean countries hosted by India. Now, if we look at the Bay of Bengal region and talk about non-traditional maritime security challenges, I think it is a perfectly fitting sort of scope to enhance cooperation between India and Sri Lanka, because as we know, the Bay of Bengal region is prone to non-traditional maritime security challenges, such as environmental risks posed by climate change, maritime terrorism, human trafficking, IUU fishing, which is illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. And these are domains which not only impact human security of India and Sri Lanka, and particularly that of Sri Lanka, but also Sri Lanka is largely dependent on these domains for their own sort of economic progress. So therefore, it is important for Sri Lanka to secure these domains as such. Now, I think when we talk about cooperation on the front of non-traditional maritime security challenges, the most critical aspect of it is maritime domain awareness, which has been mentioned by the panelists before me. Now, maritime domain awareness, of course, is key to resolve any maritime security challenge, because when we talk about maritime spaces, we have to understand that there is a lot of uncharted territory that we are talking about. It is a domain that we are not familiar with, that requires a lot of research, a lot of expertise to be built on the region. So therefore, I think it is important for both India and Sri Lanka to develop sort of expertise in maritime domain awareness and to get a sense of the kind of domain that we are dealing with. Now, for that, I think the role of information dissemination and information sharing is ever more critical. Now, both India and Sri Lanka have information fusion centers, which work primarily under the navies of the two countries. And there has been a great degree of synergy between the two countries. India works very closely with Sri Lanka as far as India's information fusion center is concerned, which is situated in Gurgaon. And I think another very important example of cooperation in the domain of maritime domain awareness has been the recent inauguration of the Maritime Rescue Coordination Center, which has also been mentioned by a few panelists before me. It was built by a grant of US dollar $6 million, US dollar 6 million. And it is a very important development as far as India and Sri Lanka's cooperation on maritime security is concerned. Now, I think cooperation among India and Sri Lanka in the domain of non-traditional security challenges, maritime security challenges, the role of information sharing. I think here, a lot of cooperation can be enhanced, especially in the domain.
Can I trouble you to wrap up, because we want a bit of discussion?
Yeah, I'll just take 2
through
moments.
some of these points. 2 minutes.
Yeah, two points. Sorry, I lost my, so there has been a lot of development in this domain, and I think 2 important areas where cooperation can be enhanced is to boost capabilities, particularly between India and Sri Lanka. And second is investment in research and development between the 2 countries in the domain of maritime domain awareness, and in order to tackle non-traditional maritime security challenges. Now, as far as India is concerned, I think there is a great exhibition of continuity in India's neighborhood first policy, as well as its Sagar vision, which is security and growth for all in the region. India is asserting itself as a preferred security partner or first responder in the cases of non-traditional security partnership. So the contention of my presentation in the crux of it is that even though there is divergence between India and Sri Lanka as far as traditional maritime security challenges in the Indian Ocean and the Bay of Bengal is concerned, particularly with regards to the question of China, on the issue of non-traditional maritime security challenges, it is in the interest of the 2 countries to enhance cooperation, and there seems to be a great degree of scope and agency between the 2 countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. While people are collecting some questions, I want to sort of ask maybe a sort of question of the panel. The first really question is, I think the importance is that we look at these multilateral issues, right? We shouldn't look at so much the bilateral issues in this panel, because we talked about the bilateral issues in the previous panel. The first question, I think, which is really important is this definition of maritime security. And I want to come back to Dr. Rohan's point about this broad definition of maritime security. And I wonder, Rohan, and my question to you is, do we add the word economic security into this? Because ports are interconnected, and the dynamics, for instance, of this trade between, say, Maldives, Sri Lanka and India, for instance, or indeed trade from outside is also part of this picture. Would you consider economic security coming into concepts of maritime security, or is that a separate discussion?
I would say that economics, it also includes economic security. It must be a holistic concept.
Thank you.
Embrace
Sorry, please.
all of that.
No, please, Rohan.
Yes. So that is my view that I would take. At one point, I had left out when I made my presentation this whole question of undersea submarine cables, safety of submarine cables. This can create a huge threat to, as you know, to modern day communications, internet. So these are all matters that must be encompassed within the concept of maritime security. Thank you.
I have a question for JJ. JJ, we've talked a lot about maritime domain awareness, and in that India has helped us in many ways. Is there a potential misuse of this by countries? How do we guard against it? And do we need a common system, or can we have different systems? Say Japan provides one to, Maldives or Bangladesh. China provides one to another. Is there systems incompatibility issues on this? Interested in your thoughts.
Exactly, yes. We are, in my opinion, right now, we have certain issues on those aspects because we have different kind of MDA platforms being used in different countries, and they are digital platforms and their applications and their way of being is different. So, in my opinion, that is what I said. We need a cohesive approach, even to Indian Ocean as well as the Bay of Bengal. The Bay of Bengal, we are talking about the subject matter, but as a whole, Indian Ocean, if we get it as, we need a cohesive sort of shareable information sharing. MDA, even for the word, it is big, but it's basically a simple things. But those simple things, if we cannot analyze well, and if we try to keep certain things only for us, not being disseminated to the real people who are being used or really in use, and then the value of the information and the whole system of MDA is futile. So thereby, it has to have a cohesive approach, and also there should be agreement within the countries to share and disseminate the information and to protect those important data within them, rather than letting those into the unwanted hands of other states that do not have kind of, just to protect it. Those data is very important for the security of the region. That's what I have to say about.
Thank you very much, JJ. And now to Pratnashree, Basu. There's an interesting question about this regional cooperation point, which I think you partly made and JJ made. Can the Coast Guard and cooperation amongst them be a route to do this? And in your view, how can we see Coast Guard cooperation evolving, in the countries of the Bay of Bengal? And how can it go beyond just Thailand and India, which are the strong naval powers in that Bay of Bengal? I mean, smaller countries' involvement, etc. I wonder if you can talk about those issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wignaraja. Yes, of course, Coast Guard cooperation between the two countries is already well established, and it's been going on for many years. The 16th edition, I think, was held earlier this year in February. And I think currently it mainly covers areas with respect to surveillance, search and rescue operations to a degree, and that kind of thing. But for participation of smaller countries, of course, I'm sure that there'd be scope for them to join if they want to. If they don't want to fully participate, there can be a phased or incremental participation process as well for these countries to, help them build their capacities before they can fully participate in a more full-fledged manner. And I'm not sure about whether there is anything on paper on this at the moment in terms of other countries participating.
Saying that I don't know anything about
but yes, that will be a very welcome development going beyond as you mentioned, the
Can I ask a follow-up question for you? India and Thailand are the two maritime powers in this Bay of Bengal, right? Is there much cooperation between them? That's the first question. And secondly, is there anything under the BIMSTEC umbrella that, the two big players can do to strengthen Coast Guard cooperation, search and rescue, anti-terrorism, the relevant issues, drugs that matter. Any thoughts on India and Thailand and how that can be a common public good to the rest of us? Yeah, thank you.
India and Thailand, of course, have the capacity to address these issues. And under the BIMSTEC framework, there is a lot on paper regarding these, as the many issues that you mentioned, drug trafficking, etc., and so on. I am not certain how much of it is actually happened on the ground, because a big challenge for the BIMSTEC has been implementation and financing constraints, which affects the projects that it perhaps wants to undertake. But a big focus of BIMSTEC has been on infrastructure, and the master plan was also released, and the work is, I believe, underway on that. But as I said, that there is a lot of things in terms of possibilities for cooperation among these countries which are on paper but are yet to take a very concrete shape on the ground.
Thank you very much. Now, lastly, I have a question for Sayanthan, Haldar. You talked a lot about extra-regional powers, and you were very worried about this in the context of the Sri Lanka-India relationship. Our panel is not about that, right? But our panel is more regional. Do you think there is space today for things that our president, for instance, has talked about in a different era, code of conduct in the Indian Ocean, other voluntary maybe codes? Is there any space for that type of thing to help maritime security, more peaceful naval interactions or maritime interactions? Is there scope for that? And is this something that India would support?
Thank you for the question. Well, when we talk about code of conduct in a large maritime expanse such as the Indian Ocean, we have to look at it from the perspective of a multilateral sort of a cooperation arrangement sort of a perspective. Now, what tends to happen in such a situation is that every country is operating in the Indian Ocean or their respective maritime neighborhoods, keeping in mind their own economic and strategic objectives. So the economic and strategic objectives or the security objectives of Sri Lanka is vastly different from that of India. So therefore, to sort of mechanize a single code of conduct or have a multilateral approach or a collective approach of state behavior in a vast maritime expanse such as the Indian Ocean often becomes difficult in that sense. But I do think there is scope for some improvement, if not to the extent that we are able to achieve a single code of conduct in the Indian Ocean region. But if we sort of cooperate more in institutions like IORA, I think it would be a significant development as far as Indian Ocean is concerned, and it would sort of serve to be beneficial for all the Indian Ocean countries in that regard, because I think IORA is the one institution that continues to bear the Indian Ocean identity. So all of us who are in the Indian Ocean Rim Association are there because we belong to the Indian Ocean and in a sense are because of the maritime characters of our respective geographies. So I think institutions such as IORA tend to become very important in that regard.
Thank you. We've got a few minutes for questions. What I propose is that we collect a few and then anyone in the panel can respond. If you could just state your question, then we'll collect and then I'll try to give a minute or two for a panelist to respond. Are there any questions?
Dr. Wignaraja, Aditya from ORF. I had a question for Sri Lankan panelists. So when we speak of maritime domain awareness and also for the fact that, Sri Lanka had, kind of imposed a temporary ban on these research vessels for the next 1 year. One of the reasons that were given was that Sri Lanka also wants to be an equal research partner and also wants to develop its domestic capacities. So I'm just curious to know what exactly is happening on that front, right? I mean, is there any push that is happening, or is there any capacity building that's happening to make Sri Lanka more of a research partner and develop its own research vessels and research capacity? That was one. And second, also, if you could shed light on the defense modernization and what it means for the maritime geography of Sri Lanka and the Bay of Bengal maritime security. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll collect one or two more and I will ask JJ to answer that question in a minute, but let's collect one or two more. Any others from anybody? JJ, why don't you respond to those two questions? You'd be the best person. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then let me ask
according to the LOSA, the law of the sea, the innocent passage means any ship can have an innocent passage through the or have their sea lines of communication. But only thing, if it's a research vessel or a military vessel, it should not run their research capabilities, or they should not have their radars on, or that kind of, they should not be into any of the research activities. Without the research activities, those ships can pass in the coastal areas or the areas under the jurisdiction of a coastal state are allowed to pass by. So that's an innocent passage. Only thing, we don't know those research vessels pass by are really on an innocent passage, or are they into a espionage or something similar kind of research activity which are unaware of. That is why the country's capability of maritime domain awareness matters. So Sri Lanka now is being supported through the UNODC as well as the Indian methodologies with the marine domain awareness. So Sri Lanka is in the right path. I also, when those research visits started moving, I also had sort of a opinion to say, why can't our closest neighbor or the powerful the regional power to be is India. So we should have kind of a, in my opinion, I reckon that we should have kind of a information sharing and also the technology sharing methodology or some kind of agreement with it. And with that, we'll be able to understand and search whether these research vessels are really on a innocent passage or otherwise. So to be aware of, we need a cooperation between the countries. Not in that sense, not only with India, but then any other countries in the region. If you have a regional approach, then most of the things can be easily tackled and handled. So that's the answer for the research vessel.
On the defense modernization, is there anything we can say, or is that still ongoing? We don't know what's happening.
Yes, defense modernization is going on. We were concentrated more into a fighting power, into more into a force structure. Force structure is mostly concentrating the human power, but then now the things are getting changed, and we are more concerning into the technological advancements into the military. And in that context, the Sri Lanka really need of support of all other developed countries, and especially the India being the region, the next neighbor of ours being the big brother. So they have advanced their military capacities in tremendous manner. The way that I saw India in 1980s and 1990s are completely unbelievable of today. So they have such a large advanced military and also the approach, their concepts and doctrine and all these things have been 100% changed, not 100%, even more than. So there are a lot of good lessons that we can learn from, and Sri Lanka needs in need of modernization. So we are into it, and it is always the situational. Time and space matters. Military modernization, we only cannot develop the military looking back the history, but of course the future and its development matters a lot. So we'll have to think of the futuristic approach and then decide of what is our to be.
Thank you, JJ. I think sadly we've run out of time. The takeaways that I took from this session were, one, that the concept of maritime security in the Bay of Bengal really should be looked at in a broad lens, not just the hard military security, but also the soft security aspects related to that. And then there's this important issue of economic security. So we need a multidisciplinary concept also embedded in some laws and some voluntary approaches. So that's one kind of take. The second take I take from this is really in this complex geopolitics today, the need for cooperation is much, much more than before, and it shouldn't just be bilaterally based. There are many who talk for this, but we have to continuously make this multilateral case. It could be a regional case, of course, and the Bay of Bengal institution needs to be strengthened. It's a little bit too weak to handle this concept. In ASEAN, for instance, and in the ASEAN regional fora, they have much stronger institutional setups to deal with these things. And so Bay of Bengal institution has to be much more strengthened. IORA is also there as a second kind of line of story, but that we also know is very, very weak. And perhaps there are too many countries to make this narrow issue interesting, but we have to pursue this, and I think we have to sort of settle on one institution which would matter for us to invest in. We talked also a lot about doing things in the small versus things in the large, and I think JJ's point in particular of the small things I think are very important. So baby steps. And I think also Pratnashree, Basu talked a lot about the Coast Guard in response to a question I gave. And I think those things are very, very important because the big deals era may be difficult. So minilateralism, I think, is the word that IR people use. I'm not an IR person, I'm an economist, so I'm learning new things. I think we have to add that very much as a tool in this story and baby steps, but monitored with some progress, right? And then last, I think, is that there's a really important role for think tanks and research processes such as this to play a role in informing the important debates. And I was again led to JJ's point and also Rohan's points about, in the US and in other places, the CNA and other institutions play a very important role in getting a second dialogue going. And I hope we can feed our work into official discussions, be it bilaterally or regionally. Thank you very much. We've had a great session. I think we should give ourselves a good hand.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wignaraja, for conducting the second session. Of course, we've run out of time. I would really like to thank people from the Sri Lankan side for being part of this dialogue, and I hope we can take this thing forward. I'm sure we will. It's been quite enlightening. Frankly speaking, I think maybe because this is the first time we're doing a track 2, the time was too short. There was so much more to talk about and to learn about. But I think this has been a good start. And I hope the organizers, Aditya, my friend out here, who's been spearheading it, among other people, Anasua and others, we take this forward, and I really look forward to the next session, which I hope would be much longer than what this one was. And I just hand over the floor to Rishan for any final words you would want to say on this particular event.
Thank you, Sushant, Sareen, for your comments, and thank you again to all the panelists and the guests for joining us today and members of our respective organizations. As you mentioned, I do hope as well that we can build on this discussion, and maybe the next time we can spend a bit more time on each of these topics. I'm grateful for Dr. Anasua Basu for really taking the initiative in wanting our two organizations to come together, and I hope that in the future we can have more in-person interactions as our in-person interactions have been in the past. Once again, thank you to all the panelists and the Observer Research Foundation. And on behalf of the Geopolitical Cartographer, I look forward to taking this discussion forward into the next phase. Thank you.
Seconding Rishan, and the in-person thing should be in Sri Lanka because that's where the party really happens. Delhi is really terrible from that point of view. So maybe Sri Lanka is a good place for a in-person meeting, the next one. Let's see if we can wrangle something out of our foundations and organize something like that. We look forward to it. Thanks a lot.